Welcome to the Collective Chat. My name is Kendall Smiley, and it has been forever since we've been back. So I'm so happy to have my special guest, Jack Kelly.
What's
now,
up?
I had to look to see when we actually met each other. It was 2005 was when we met at Stingray. That was when they opened. So that was probably about the time that I had met you.
Mm-hmm.
He is an awesome motivational speaker. He's an author, marathon runner. So we're gonna get into all of that because I got tons of questions.
That's right.
But when I met you, now I know that you got into politics in 2013, but you were kind of dabbling in politics way back then.
It's so funny you say that because we're here to talk about my book. What's interesting is that I when I was writing the book, there was this transitional point that there weren't many people in my life, and it was when you were there at that point because I was just getting my life together. 2004, I think I was like 2.5 years sober. So I mean, I was still on probation then, which a lot of people are shocked to hear that. Like I had to get color coded and doing urine screens. I had to call up and do a hotline number. But
let's go back. Let's go back a little bit. So
that's when
you wrote a book and it came about because you had a hockey injury. You talk a little bit about how you got into substance abuse, and I didn't know you played hockey either. So I'm a big hockey fan. I play hockey too.
So I should have told you that back then. You would have been impressed with
me. I didn't know. I didn't know. So that was something I didn't know about you that I discovered. And that is kind of the slippery slope that you got into, So tell us a little bit about you were playing, you got injured, and then that kind of snowballed into basically cleaning up your life after that.
Right. So hockey is a great sport, as you know.
Yes.
And I think anybody that would be exposed to it would love it. So growing up where I grew up in Charlestown, an Irish Catholic Boston kid is probably going to play hockey or become like a priest or something like that, right? Isn't that the sort of knowledge thing, right?
With the name John
I played
Kelly.
hockey, didn't become a priest at all, for sure. But I played hockey, which was, as you said, like a sport that's pretty here, and I loved it. So I was kind of I would say I was good, right? I don't want to say I was like top notch, but I was in the part of the world that was good hockey players. So I played at a school called Mattnon High School, which was in Cambridge, which still is in Cambridge. And at the time, it was one of the premier leagues, you'd probably say in the country. I think that Massachusetts and Michigan were the big states for American hockey. I mean, you had Canadian players and then you had the European players. And it was Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, but that was still where you were getting your sort of big American hockey players. So I was playing right in that top-notch league. I mean, so...
What position did you play?
Right wing.
Me too.
Really?
Yeah, right wing and center.
So right wing, and so I would sometimes shift from center. Now, I would play center if I was on let's say, a team or a league where the skaters weren't as good. So then I would have to play center to sort of
balance it out.
Exactly. But when I was playing in that league, the Catholic League, where we were playing Catholic Memorial, at the time Reading High was really good.
Okay.
So Arlington Catholic, St. John's Prep, things like that.
And what year are we looking at? 2000?
So 1999.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm a 90s kid, right hardcore 90s kid, with all the glory and terribleness of it, Right. So I was playing, but before I had sustained my injury before I went to Mattnon, and so for me as a kid growing up in Charlestown, and I'm still like this, I wanted to play for Mattnon because that's where the best players were.
Okay.
I had always wanted to go to that school. Plus, it had a different flavor. It was co-ed, which was different. Either the public schools were co-ed, but the real sort of Catholic schools were all, all boys. It was serious and whatever. So I went there because I wanted to play for the best, and I wanted to be kind of in a place that kind of had an edge, and that school had it. They were good with an edge because they had girls. Plus, they played hockey, so there was this sort of thing oh, wow, just to give you an insight into kind of the personality. And even at that age, you're sort of making decisions about kind of where you're going to go, who you're going to be. But
you were focused.
I was focused, 100% focused. And that's what, in that book, it was all about getting there, because if I could get there, then I can go do whatever other goals I had with it. Unfortunately, I had battling an old shoulder injury that had sustained probably 3 years before I went there, and it got worse because I didn't treat it at all. And I just kept playing and playing hard, and there wasn't the sort of stuff we
Yeah,
have
and you're
today.
getting pretty hit.
Correct. So what it was is my shoulder used to pop out. So by the time I got to my junior year in high school, it would literally pop out if I went to take a shot, like, you know, like
Yeah.
quick instincts with hockey. It would pop out immediately. There would be no way to do
And you're
it.
popping it back in.
There you go. You get the whole drill. It's like the hockey player thing, right? You're never leaving the field, all that stuff, right? You know, you're going to have to kill me to get me off the ice, right? And that's a mentality I'm glad I got. I'm sure most hockey players or football players kind of have that there's something about it, you know, get up.
Yep.
Get up. So anyhow, I would be like in band, I'm going on the bench, you know, and then they're popping it in, but it was ridiculous. And you have to remember too, I'm 16, there is children responsibility here. It isn't just about like, you know, just put a needle in there and send them out there, because there is some level of responsibility that you can't have a teenager just popping their shoulder out and just sort of pulling it back in. So long story short, I think the trainer had alerted my father that this was no longer doable. He wasn't just going to keep popping my shoulder in all the time, you know. So I had surgery that, I think it was my junior year. And my doctor was the Bruins and Patriots doctor at the time, only to give the background that he was a very well-established doctor. Had the surgery, went normal, and then I was prescribed opiate pain medicine, and OxyContin had just came out probably 6 months prior to that. So it was like that.
And that was really big at that time. That was on the scene, you know, with opiates, and it wasn't talked about though.
No.
Nobody talked about it. Nobody, but it was a big problem.
Huge.
Especially coming off of the 80s with Reagan, and then going into the 90s, and all the don't do drugs and your brain on drugs. And that's what we grew up with. And then all of a sudden we're hitting and going into the early 2000s now, and you were in it. You were in it.
In the thick of it, and that's part of the way why I wanted to write the book. And I got a second book I want to write. I got a lot of books I want to write because I'm insane. Right? But you were touching on something that, to me, I want to go deeper into, and it is Boston has more of a role in it than they think. And I would say in a real beautiful way, more than our reputation, which has been earned to a degree. But this is something that gets lost a lot. A lot of those laws, if people really understand, like the crack laws that were predominantly affecting African American communities, especially New York.
People, you know, people keeping them in jail or having a small incident. Now we wouldn't even think anything of it.
Nothing of it.
And be in jail for a long time.
Well, it's a sort of genocide, no doubt about it. I mean, you took what they did with cocaine and crack. They just, if you boiled it, it was one crime. Come on. And so, I mean, that is what it is. We all know what it is. But what I had to be reminded of, and I had just sort of like got into this with the pandemic, as we all do. We were all watching whatever we were watching and getting into our rabbit holes, you know. And one of my favorite athletes of all time that has touched me till this day, and as a young kid, was Lenny Bias, who was a former basketball player who some people said was going to be Michael Jordan's his main arch enemy. You know, Bird had Magic, Brady had Peyton Manning, you know, now he has Patrick Mahomes. Who's ever like 2 years old, he'll probably be battling that in like 10 years. He's never going to stop. But this Lenny Bias was supposed to be the next Michael Jordan, and Red Auerbach had drafted him, and he was coming here and died. Just overdosed, died. And he didn't come, he wasn't a gangbanger, and it was like sort of who he was portrayed towards like society in America as one, but he wasn't portrayed that way in Boston, which doesn't get talked about a lot. There was genuine sadness for that, real sadness. The Celtics, you could argue, were cursed. You had what happened with Reggie after that, and
I remember when he died.
Exactly, and that I forgot about this. They took that Len Bias, and that's the sort of emotional foundation of how the sort of like crack laws came and all the like, you know, just say no. That was sort of what got people in. And as I've looked at that and looked at like how it came to people like, you know, my neighborhood getting back into drugs and how that was sort of like played out, it made me realize how awful that period was and what they did to.
But you also a white male.
I'm a white male.
And that was very, you know, they're not going to assume that you're going to be on drugs or being able to function and be productive, and you still masked it, being able to go to school and function and go to, I don't know if you were working a part-time job or anything, but you were making it work. You were hiding it. You weren't letting everybody see what was happening.
Correct. I think like for me, Yeah, I went down pretty quick. I tried to hide it. You know, I did a lot of bad stuff, you would say, to like my mother and father. I would steal money, things that just horrible stuff. And that's just the surface things. And I get into that in the book. But I couldn't hide it that well because I just immediately like went like this. Now remember, I'm a white male, but what's interesting about, and this is why I wrote this book, because it shows you the complications of not just human beings and culture, but America.
Yeah.
And we have these big discussions about race, mental health, violence. I've always been of the belief they're all connected. Mental health, violence, addiction, it's all one and the same, in my opinion. You're not even getting a good school system if you're not right here at home. That's how I feel. So if we're not fixing neighborhood blocks, we don't have a shot. But the thing that was interesting for me, I grew up in Charlestown. So yes, I'm a white male and I have all the privileges that come with that. What was fascinating to me, when I would go to Matanon parties, which were like the private school kids, and they were all the suburban kids, and I couldn't believe how different I lived, even though I looked at my mother and father as heroes because they gave me everything that I needed and I had every opportunity. I never went without anything, love, things, anything. I mean, I couldn't believe just by being in Charleston, despite having that great foundation, I did have a different upbringing that absolutely shaped who I was compared to people who looked just like me. So I was getting their privilege, but also still getting this sort of hype around Charlestown. So what was the other fascinating thing about Charlestown, just like you would see in a lot of communities that are economically depressed, we use sports as a way to get out.
Yeah.
So hockey was a way to get out. I'm not hanging out in, Winchester, Massachusetts with kids my age, no offense, unless I'm good at hockey. That's just the truth. How I realized the kinship I had with black kids from Boston who were from Roxbury and Mattapan, when I knew I was more like them than sort of my fellow white kids, was when I was dating a girl in high school. Her dad, I've never forgot this, when he found out I was from Charlestown, did everything in his power to dissuade it and sort of like man up to me at one point. And
wow.
yeah, like he was like, and I was like, come on, dude. Like,
and you were young, you know? You were
like,
young, you were a kid.
Right. And at that age, I mean, that just made me want to date her more. So I was like, and now that I'm a dad, I will never do that. I'm never going to do that stupid trick, because I was like, okay, But I remember realizing that, wow. And so I had the Irish Charlestown culture. So when OxyContin became a thing, what people don't realize, kids in my community, I knew some and whatever, were robbing pharmacies now for OxyContin. They weren't robbing banks, which is what we were sort of known for in the Code of Silence and all that. And so the media portrayed it as, oh, look at these Charlestown people robbing pharmacies. And it wasn't until it went to Winchester, which were the kids I was hanging out with who were buying it off of us and that whole deal. When they got the problem, that's when it became a public health crisis. And so
interesting.
I feel, and I think a lot of people from my community feel like we're stuck in two worlds. Like we
half in, half out,
because we don't get the, sort of, not to say there's a credit for sort of like the pain you go through. I think there's a feeling of like we're a part of that pain too. And it's hard to articulate that. So sort of the motivation to write that book was to just sort of like, as a way to bring people together through pain, basically. That's how I felt like it was a bigger concept than just me or anything, So deep, I know, deep. We're gonna have to do a podcast.
I know. So I saw you 2005.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in the height of fashion shows and doing all kinds of things. And I lived in Boston too. And I remember you were young and you were into politics. You were motivated. You wanted to change. You were like an up and coming activist in the community. And I had it's like, who is this kid? Like, what is he doing? And I was just, people just gravitate towards you because of your energy. And the fact that you were able to, in that low moment that you had, were able to pick yourself up and know that there was something more than what was happening. Like you had the realization, I don't know what that moment was like for you when you were like, you hit that rock bottom. And I always think about Les Brown, when you like hit rock bottom and you are down and you can look up though and realize that you can make a difference and you can change your life. Like what was that experience? Was it someone that came into your life, or was it something that said like, I'm all set, like I'm good, like I need to I need to switch things up? Because you were on a rough path. You had not only gone into Oxy, but you had gone into heroin, and that's usually a telltale sign that people aren't going to live through that. You know, a lot of people don't come back from that.
Never. No, and it's funny. Like the past year, I couldn't like really get in touch with my emotions in the sense that like I couldn't cry, which is like normal for a guy, right? Because like don't cry, whatever. But for me, it was like I knew that there was a lot of like release I could get from it, but I just couldn't. The whole time I've been sober, I just can't cry. It was weird. This past year, I cry over everything. It's the most bizarre stuff ever. It's like, and so I have these moments where I can get in touch with stuff. But I was thinking of my cousin Megan, who was very close to me, and she overdosed and died.
I'm sorry.
This morning, no. I was thinking about her in a good way because her son, him and I got a tattoo appointment coming up in a month, and he's gonna be 18, and like he's all excited for it, and he like talked to me about it today, and I was just like thinking of her and just thinking of like the path that we were on, which was very similar and culturally the same, and she didn't make it,
and you did.
And I did, but what does that mean? I mean, okay.
It means a lot to people that just need just a little bit to realize that there's so much more to thrive, to live for. If it's not within themselves, that they can't find it, if they could just hear that someone had gone through a similar experience, and that's you, to just get that hope to realize that they can switch things up and they can do it.
You can. And it's like, you know, one of the things I remember from you and like what like my sort of like energy or whatever is like, I sometimes think that can keep you alive, like, you know, almost like if your body's about to give up when you're actually physically dying, if something happened, you can kind of jolt yourself to keep going because there's some sort of motivation, like I'm not done yet, I got to keep going. And like, you know, and I would meet people like you, right, whether it would be in that moment and like now, I mean, we reconnect and
after all these years,
it's
just like
right now you're, you know, that's like wow, both of us, like, you know, but it was. I want to, when I create something or why I wanted to get sober or why I want to write that book and tell people like there's a purpose. It's not a purpose to just be alive. If you're just going to be alive and sober and like miserable and everybody's going to treat you like, you know, then what's the point of like getting motivated and hopeful? And like my motivation is because I can run into people like you who can kind of enliven me and, you know, show me what the world is about, things that I don't know, just about different people. And I remember when like I was doing that, it was Junk, my clothing line, which nobody was really around except for I did it, but no one knew what happened after. I kind of just like did whatever. But you were one of the people that had a front row seat to that. And no one in my life really did. And I still remember being connected with someone like you because you were bringing this type of creative energy.
Yeah, we were bringing models in. We were having fashion shows.
It was amazing. Remember we had that fashion show, Route 1. Oh my God. That night, right? So I
forgot all about
it was one of the worst nights of my life. So like I had fun at the party, right? After that night, like you left, it was great success. It was like what, like Jim and I, who was the like host? He was like a big like host at the time.
Remember.
Like you like, I don't know how you did this. It was like a legit fashion show. I'm like, how is this even happening? But like something happened at the end where someone didn't get tipped or whatever. And of course, I'm just standing there, and it like got all thrown at me. So I'm like, there was like I think a kid from like Saugus, and like we were like arguing, and I wasn't as evolved as I am now, right? And it just was an insane night.
I didn't know about that.
Oh, it was terrible. Then I leave, and I had like some old parking tickets that I had from my bad times. Exactly. And so I get pulled over. They tow my car.
Oh, no.
2 o'clock in the morning. I'm stuck in Route 1.
Oh, no.
And now I'm like, what if I get these like kids from Saugus?
Well, you've got it together, and I'm so glad. And since then, between writing the book, marathon running.
Yep.
I did the Boston Marathon too. So, and I saw you do the New York Marathon.
I did New York. I have 2 left out of the major 6.
All right.
I did New York, Chicago.
Okay.
Berlin.
Oh, I didn't know you did Berlin.
Yep, Berlin.
Wow.
I did Berlin right before I met my daughter. Literally, like right before I met her. I met my daughter about almost 2.5 years ago when she was 11, and she lives in Michigan, so when I went to meet her, I ran the Berlin Marathon, then was able to venture out and found my grandfather's POW prison camp in Germany, which was its own interesting story. And
wait, back up with the daughter. How did that happen?
Wow. Yeah, it happened. Like it's one of the she's been best thing that ever happened to me.
Good.
Meeting her was an amazing
Good.
thing for me. So, you know, I hope she doesn't see this because she'll be like embarrassed.
Well, they are usually embarrassed.
Yeah, she's 13, so she's
My
like.
boys are
I'm
14, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Listen, mom's on Instagram
Right.
and on YouTube. That's too much for them. It's like way too much.
It's
But
true.
I'm so glad you came, and we have so much more to talk about. So we're gonna have to like meet up again.
Let's do it again. Yeah.
Please, the book, Jack Kelly, Sharp Needle. How can people reach you?
So you can go to my website. It's jackkelly3.com. So it's JACKKELLY 3.com. Jackkelly3.com. So KELLY, not EY. Jackkelly3.com.
What would you say? What message do you want to leave with the viewers about how to stay inspired, to stay motivated? Because you can only have so much motivation, but you have to keep going. It's that ebb and flow when you're feeling like low and you just don't want to stay there. How do you help? What would you say to people to keep them going in those low moments?
I'm hesitant to ever tell someone like whatever is going to work for me isn't going to work for someone else.
That's true.
Like, but what I would say into that is find something or someone or a situation that just always moves you. So when life comes at you, which it is for all of us, nobody escapes. I don't care who you are. I don't care if your whole life goes perfect. You will at one point be 89 years old, sitting in your mansion, and you will too have to face the consequences of life. We all do. And I just know that. So I think that the less personal you take those really significant issues, even if it is personal, and just say, whatever, that's just life. Sometimes an ant gets stepped on. It's life. And if you just realize that had nothing to do with me and I just got to get up, and it's like, okay, what do I need? I got shelter, food, and what else? I don't need much. So if I have some of that and I get access to it, I can make the rest up, and just believe in yourself, get up and do it. That's it.
Believe in yourself. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It was awesome seeing you.
Thank you for watching The Collective Chat. We'll see you soon.